You are looking at a Social Security strategy that married couples leave on the table every single day. It can add $250,000 to your lifetime household income without you earning one extra cent. A couple in Ohio, Joseph and Margaret, just claimed it weeks before it would have disappeared forever. Most couples never coordinate their benefits start dates. The ones who do keep a fortune, the others never see. The University of Michigan surveyed adults last year. Only 34% could explain how spousal benefits are calculated. More than half had never even heard of them. That knowledge gap is costing married couples hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime, and the window to fix it is closing fast. The strategy is called coordinating claim ages. Joseph and Margaret finally understood it weeks before the money would have vanished. Here is exactly how it works. Here is what most married couples never hear. Social Security was designed for spouses. In 1939, amendments added two new benefits: a spousal benefit equal to 50% of the worker's retirement check, and a survivor benefit that lets the lower earner keep the higher earner's full monthly amount after the higher earner passes. Those two rules are the foundation of everything that follows. But in the 86 years since, the system grew into a maze of 9,000 possible claim age combinations for a married couple. A maze where a single wrong choice costs 6 figures of lifetime income and leaves a widow scraping by on a reduced check for 2 decades or more. Joseph turned 63 this spring. He is a retired high school teacher in Dayton. Margaret just turned 62. She worked part-time jobs most of her life, raising their 3 kids. Her own Social Security statement shows around $900 a month if she claims at full retirement age. His, at full retirement age, is just over $2,800. Their financial plan, like millions of couples, was simple. Both sign up at the same time, somewhere around 65. Take the money, enjoy retirement. No one ever told them that simple plan was a wealth destruction machine. Here is the math they never ran. The lower earner, claiming early at age 62, locks in a permanently reduced spousal benefit. The higher earner, who waits until 70, earns 8% delayed retirement credits every single year. That delay compounds into a monthly check nearly 32% larger than the full retirement age amount. But here is the critical piece. The higher earner's inflated check becomes the survivor's check the moment he dies. That means every dollar of delayed credit the husband earns becomes a dollar the wife receives for the rest of her life. And women outlive men by an average of 6 years. A 65-year-old woman has a 1 in 3 chance of living past 90. Joseph and Margaret were about to leave $217,000 on the table, not because their math was wrong, because they never ran it. But they were still inside the window. One decision would save it. The other would blow it up forever. We will show you exactly what happened next, right after this. Joseph sat down at his kitchen table with a Social Security statement in each hand and a calculator that had never been asked to do this kind of math. On the left, Margaret's estimated full retirement age benefit, $912. On the right, his own, $2,843. Both numbers looked small after decades of work. But the real number was the one the calculator hadn't yet spit out. The household lifetime income gap between claiming now at 62 and 63 versus running the coordinated strategy that the statement never explains. They called a retired benefits counselor named Paul, who had been doing pro bono sessions at the Dayton Senior Center. Paul opened the conversation with 2 questions that sounded more like a doctor's exam than financial advice. When does the higher earner plan to claim? And how long do you expect your spouse to live? The first question felt safe. The second one pulled the air out of the room, because Paul wasn't asking for an actuarial projection. He was asking them to stare at the one variable that changes every other number in the household: survivor income. Margaret is a woman. A 62-year-old woman in the United States today has a life expectancy of nearly 86. Her husband, if he claims at 70, will push his check to nearly $4,000 a month. That number, locked in by delayed retirement credits, becomes her monthly survivor check after he passes. If he claimed early instead, at 63, his benefit would drop to just over $2,200. That number then becomes her survivor income. The difference between 4,000 and 2,200, stretched across 2 decades, could mean the difference between staying in the paid-off house and moving into a single room in her daughter's basement. Paul asked Joseph to imagine dying at 73. Not because anyone wants to, but because Social Security forces every married couple to make decisions, as if that could happen, the year after they file. If Joseph's survivor benefit is $4,000 a month, Margaret keeps $4,000. If it's $2,200, she keeps $2,200. The delayed retirement credit doesn't expire. It transfers across a marriage and lands squarely on the widow's check every single month. Now, Paul turned to the spousal benefit itself. The 50% rule. Margaret could collect a benefit equal to half of Joseph's full retirement age amount if she waited until her own full retirement age of 67. But she could start drawing her own much smaller benefit as early as 62, then switch to the spousal when Joseph finally filed. That switch is automatic. The Social Security Administration runs what's called a deemed filing calculation and gives you the higher amount. For Margaret, that meant 9 years of reduced checks on her own record while Joseph's delayed credits grew. Then an immediate jump to a check that was nearly double what she was getting. Paul ran the lifetime total. Both claiming early at 62 and 63 gave the couple roughly $690,000 in cumulative household benefits over a reasonable lifespan. He then ran the coordinated scenario. Joseph delays to 70. Margaret claims her own reduced benefit at 62, then steps up to spousal at 67 when he files. The household total jumped past $900,000. The gap was $217,000 in after-tax, guaranteed, inflation-adjusted income that you cannot outlive. And then Paul showed them the hidden mechanism that makes the whole thing work. The lower earner's spousal benefit does not rise 1 penny beyond the 50% mark. Once Margaret hits her full retirement age, waiting longer does nothing. So every year she delayed past 67 to claim the spousal was a year of money. She would never recover. That is the precise structural reason the optimal strategy calls for the lower earner to claim earlier and the higher earner to wait. The system rewards one side for patience and the other for speed. Joseph looked at Margaret and said 4 words she hadn't heard in 4 decades of marriage. We missed the math, but the math had one more trapdoor. To execute the plan, they needed cash to live during the gap years. Joseph couldn't take Social Security until 70. That meant 8 years without his check. They had retirement savings, but pulling from them now carried its own silent penalty. The tax code, the sequence of returns risk, the hard reality of turning a 401k balance into a bridge that carries you to a finish line you can't yet see. They were about to discover that the Social Security claiming strategy wasn't just a Social Security question. It was a full wealth coordination problem that crossed into IRAs, tax brackets, and a deadline they couldn't afford to miss. The deadline was not a date on the calendar. It was the moment one of them picked up the phone and said, "I'd like to file." Because once you file, the strategy is locked. There is no do-over, no 60-day return window, no rewind. Social Security allows a one-time withdrawal of an application within the first 12 months, but you have to repay every dollar you received. For a couple living on those checks, that's not a reset button. It's a financial trapdoor. So the decision had to be right before the first direct deposit ever hit their account. Paul laid out the cash gap in plain terms. Joseph was 63. To execute the coordinated strategy, he would need to wait 7 more years to claim at 70. 7 years with no Social Security income from the higher earner. Margaret could file her own reduced benefit at 62 and bring in roughly $740 a month. That was barely enough to cover the property taxes and the electric bill. The rest of their living expenses, about $42,000 a year after her check, had to come from somewhere else. The obvious source was their IRA, a mix of pre-tax contributions Joseph had made during his teaching years. Paul took a deep breath. He said, "Every dollar you pull from a traditional IRA in those gap years is ordinary income. It gets stacked on top of Margaret's Social Security, which is also partly taxable. When you add those 2 income streams together, you can trigger something the tax code calls the provisional income threshold. Cross that line and up to 85% of your Social Security benefits become taxable. So, not only are you draining the IRA faster than you planned, you are also lighting a fuse on a tax bomb that will explode exactly when Joseph's delayed benefit finally kicks in and your household income jumps. He showed them the numbers on a yellow legal pad. If they pulled $42,000 a year from the IRA to fill the gap, their provisional income would push them into a bracket where every additional dollar of Social Security was taxed as if it were ordinary income. The effective marginal tax rate on those IRA withdrawals could hit 27%, even though their nominal bracket was 12%. That was the hidden penalty, the six-figure headline never mentioned. The $217,000 of lifetime gain came with a side of front-loaded tax pain that could erode 5 figures off the total if they handled the withdrawals wrong. But then Paul circled a number at the bottom of the pad and said 4 words that shifted everything. It gets worse, then it gets permanent. The Social Security Administration uses what's called a deemed filing rule. For anyone born after January 1st, 1954, when you apply for one benefit, you are automatically applying for all benefits you are eligible to receive. Margaret could not file just for her own small retirement benefit now, and later switch to a full spousal at 67 without consequences. The moment she claimed at 62, she was deemed to be filing for spousal as well. And because she was claiming early, the spousal top-up was permanently reduced. Instead of the full 50% of Joseph's full retirement age benefit, she would lock in something closer to 32.5%. That was the hidden cost of bridging the gap too early. It meant the lower earner's total spousal credit was smaller for life, not just during the gap years. Paul said it was like permanently shrinking your pension before you ever receive the full check. And millions of couples walk right into it because nobody tells them the order of operations matters more than the numbers themselves. But then he flipped the pad. There was a way through it. Not a loophole, but a precise sequencing of cash flows and tax moves that would keep the $217,000 intact and protect the survivor benefit without triggering the tax bomb. He drew 3 boxes on the page, numbered 1, 2, 3. He said, "Do these in order before you make one phone call to Social Security." The first box held an instruction Joseph and Margaret had never heard in their 41 years of marriage, and it would change everything about how they saw their own retirement. Box number 1. Know your baseline. Paul wrote down each of their primary insurance amounts, the exact dollar figure Social Security promises at full retirement age. Joseph, $2,843. Margaret, $912. He circled Margaret's number and said, "This is the key that unlocks the spousal bridge. Because if you claim it at 62, you trigger a reduction that follows you forever. The spousal top-up later gets shrunk by the same early filing penalty." So the first decision is not about Joseph at all. It's about whether Margaret waits. Box number 2. Bridge the gap with the right money, not any money. Paul drew a line from their IRA and then crossed it out with a heavy red marker. Any dollar from a pre-tax account in a zero-income year looks cheap, but it turns Social Security dollars into taxable income down the road. Instead, he pointed to their Roth IRA, an account they had almost forgotten. Roth withdrawals don't count toward provisional income. They could pull the full $42,000 a year from the Roth, keep Margaret's Social Security entirely tax-free, and preserve the tax bracket headroom for Joseph's delayed checks. It was the difference between losing 85% of her benefit to taxation and losing 0. Box number 3. Claim in the right order on the right timeline. Margaret would file for her own retirement benefit at 62, taking $742 a month. That alone would not trigger the spousal filing because Joseph hadn't yet filed. When Joseph reached 70, he would file for his maximized benefit of $3,760. The moment his application hit the system, Margaret would be deemed to file for spousal, and Social Security would calculate her new total. Her own $912, reduced to $742, plus a reduced spousal top-up, would land at just over $1,100 a month. Not the full 50%, but permanently higher than if they had both filed early. The household monthly total at $74,860, and that number becomes Margaret's survivor. Check the day Joseph passes. Paul pushed the calculator across the table. Lifetime gap, $217,000. Margaret asked what happened if Joseph died before 70. And then Paul shared the final detail that made the whole room quiet. If the higher earner dies before claiming, the survivor can still receive the delayed retirement credits as if the deceased had waited until full retirement age to file, and in some cases even later. The system does not punish you for dying early. It protects the widow with a benefit calculation based on what the higher earner could have received. No rush, no gamble. Just a guarantee written into the code. Joseph and Margaret filed Margaret's application the following Tuesday. Not because they had all the answers, but because they finally had the 3 steps that showed them where the money was and what would happen if they walked away. They never wanted to be one of the 46% who never heard of the benefit at all. And now they never will. Social Security was never designed to be a solo game. It was built for households, for husbands and wives who made decisions together about kids, mortgages, and what retirement actually costs. And yet, the most valuable claiming strategy most couples will ever use is hidden behind a phone call. Nobody tells you to make. The spousal benefit is not a bonus. It is a structural right baked into the system since 1939. The survivor protection is not a consolation. It is the entire point. Joseph and Margaret saved $217,000 with 3 steps and a calculator. The question now is not whether the strategy works. It is whether you know your own primary insurance amount and whether you have run the math that your Social Security statement leaves blank. If this made sense to you, there is a special offer I have put together. The link is in the first pinned comment. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for the next couple who is about to leave $250,000 on the table and hasn't realized it yet.